Monday morning, and welcome to another edition of Monday Mornings with Mark, the Stewardship Coach. I'm Mark Brooks, and I'm your Stewardship Coach, and I'm excited to have another Monday morning of group teaching time for those of you who are our members and those who I've invited to just sort of hang out with us as we teach another key topic about generosity and how that can impact giving at your church. So, let's move forward. Oh, how did that screen get there? Kansas City Chiefs. It got there because I was born in Kansas City many years ago, too many years ago. In fact, I remember the last time the Kansas City Chiefs were in the Super Bowl. And I don't talk about politics or sports here because that's so divisive. But when you haven't been there in 50 years, come on, man, you need to give a little bit of love to the Kansas City Chiefs. So congratulations to the Chiefs. And I hope you had a great Super Bowl and enjoyed everything. So anyway, back to what we're talking about. Here's my main screen, which gives a lot of information about me. The Stewardship Coach. If you have not followed me already on Twitter, please do so. Stewardship Man is my handle. Let me tell you the value of that. When I post a new blog post or article or anything new, and I'm always doing that, it's going to be put on Twitter first, so you can get that, link into that, and so it's a good way to keep abreast of various things that I do. If you are a member or you're one of my client churches that we do capital campaigns for or anything like that, here's what I always say is the most important part of this screen, and that's my email address. It is mark@acts17generosity.com. And that's how you can email me for all of your questions. And we do a very good job of trying to answer those as quickly as we possibly can. For those of you who are members, every Monday morning you get this newsletter. Here is today's newsletter on February 3rd, 2020, which also happens to be my mother's 91st birthday. So I called and wished her a happy birthday this morning. Blessed to still have two living parents, 91, praying those genes go deep within our family. This was the issue of the Stewardship Coach that went out today. Its focus is on preaching on stewardship, but it is in vain with where I have been in the last few weeks, sort of laying out for you what I really view as the future for us in the area of stewardship. And we're going to talk about that today because I've been talking about what I'm calling the two tracks of generosity that all of us need to establish to make sure that our churches are not just fully funded for today, but also that we have financial stability as we move into the middle of this 21st century. So we'll talk a little bit about that today. We're going to talk about the two-track rationale, what my thinking is behind that. We're going to do a two-track overview very briefly, and also very briefly a two-track implementation. Now, these are the things in the last two editions of the Stewardship Coach I've been fleshing out for you, these two tracks, and we're going to be talking about this more and more and more as we advance through the new year, because I really believe that my partners and I, after years of really being thinking, praying, researching this, we've arrived at what we believe is really the great track moving forward for us when it comes to generosity. So we'll lay that out. And then, as we always do at the end of my teaching time, we'll have a time for question and answer, and that's when I stop the recording, because a lot of times, questions being typed in, that kind of thing, it takes some time. So the recording part, some of you are listening by recording, we stop the question and answer. If you wonder why, well, that's it. So here's how you ask questions. I use GoToMeeting as a great tool for webinars, and what we have found, it works better for you just to type in your question and for me to deal with those questions when we get to the end of my presentation. So follow that sort of explanation. On the right-hand side, you'll see a, like a menu list, and it'll show you how to type in your questions. Type those in, go ahead and send them to me. I'll leave them in the queue. I typically don't get to them until I get to the end. I found it kind of distracts me. It's kind of like somebody holding their hand up in the middle of the sermon. It can totally distract you. So there we go. Let's get into this today's teaching time as we talk about the two-track rationale for what we're going to be talking about. And it really comes from this, the premise that I've been sharing with you for literally years, and that is that giving is decline, and it's not going to recover with the current strategies that we have in the church today. We've got to do a better job, and we've got to do a better job very quickly. And that's why I said that this is something that has to be addressed sooner rather than later So what my focus is, as I work with client churches, is first, let's keep what you have. It's very, very crucial. When I work with my business, I try to keep the clients I have, keep them happy, keep them, focused, so that I don't have to work hard to find new clients. And so one of the strategies that a lot of the nonprofits are recommending, it's my recommendation, is that we work hard for our current group of donors to keep what we have. But the other focus is we've got to always be thinking about next generation. And that's where our struggle comes in, because they are not as generosity trained as current generations, and they view it differently. They approach it differently, and we've got to be able to attract and communicate with the next generation if we're going to be sustainable financially as we move into 2030, 2040, and then beyond to 2050. Now remember, in the decline of giving, it's projected that Americans will only give 1% of their disposable income to the church by the year 2050. That's less than 30 years away. Right now, they're giving 2%, just a fudge of over 2%, which means you're potentially looking at a 50% decline in giving as we move forward. I think that in some instances is going to move quicker than 2050, and it's going to be much more exacerbated than what we might think of. So we got to keep what we've got. We've got to raise up the next generation. Blackbutt Institute, which is the leading think tank on charitable giving, it's actually here in Charleston where I live, put out a report, a couple, that we have a 5-year window. And what I put here is they put this report out in 2015. So we're about a year and a half into the report they put out in the summer of 2015 or 18 when they said we had a 5-year window. So we've got about a 3-year window. Now, my view in the church is we always lag a little bit behind. And what's driving this 5-year window is the demographic generational shift in donors. Both baby boomers moving into retirement, you've got the next generation coming up, and they don't give the same proportions or with the same intensity that older generations have been giving. So we're in a sort of a situation where we've got a problem. But I think we've got about a 5 to 10 year window. And I think we'll see that window closing quicker for some churches. It might stay open longer for other churches. And so with that as a background, my thing is I'm working with clients now is let's think of the next 10 years. What's going to be our strategy so that we land in 2030 in as good financial position as possible? Because if we had a 5-year window by the experts in 2018, it means the clock is ticking and we need to move forward. So that's kind of the rationale behind what we're looking at. So my overview is this, that you've got to think in terms of 2 tracks. One is your leadership or your leaders track. Now, your leaders are already your giving leaders. And giving leaders, I'm not just talking about people who are giving you 6 or 5-figure type of gifts. I'm talking about people who have the gift of generosity, or they just want to use what God has blessed them with to be a blessing to other people. We'll come back to that sort of definition here in a minute. But leader track is where what you already have, and we want to be able to make sure that you keep that which you already have, but also think through, and we'll flesh this out in later sessions, we want to think through how that group can leave a legacy behind. And then the second track is the discipleship track. And so in the last 2 editions of the Stewardship Coach, you've seen me introduce this, and then you're going to see me in the successive weeks and really throughout this year sort of flesh out what that looks like for you practically. So let's look at the leadership track. In fact, I think that's wrong. A leadership track shouldn't be future givers, it should be current givers. I do this live, and when you do things live, sometimes you think, did I not proofread that? I did, but I missed that. So not future giver, but current leaders. All right, so that will help us a little bit. So let's kind of walk through this. One of the things that I found in studying giving data, and no one has studied more giving data that I know of than myself. I've been doing it for over 20 years. I think it's kind of humorous that there's a lot of companies out there now doing financial data for you. They're using the platform that I helped develop with several of other people that I worked with during the time. But I've been looking at data from Joel Osteen's church. The church is running 100, and here's what we discovered. On average, 15% of the donors give 50% of what is regularly given. Now, when you're a super mega church, it changes. I just did, in fact, I'm working on a note today to a church that's got about a $20 million budget, and their 50% line was at 6.4% of their overall donors. And my church, 30 million, very similar kind of tracking. The rest of us in normalcy, you're going to find that about 15% of your overall donor base gives half of all that's given to your church. If you were to do a capital campaign, all right, let's say you need to relocate, you've got to build, you've got to pay off a debt, you need a new children's wing or whatever it is, and you enter into a capital campaign, here's what we find. In capital campaigns, half of what is pledged and given comes from half of the 15% that give you half in your annual operating budget. Are you confused? Stay with me, because this makes sense. And here's what we found. The other half of that 15%, by the way, I'm in a church right now where a smaller church, $500,000 budget, and their 50% line, 18 donors. So 18 donors are going to, half of that 18, in other words, 9 are probably going to pledge half of the million we're looking at raising, and the other half of those 18 will probably give 14%. Guys, it always is true, the few give the majority. So what we've got to think through, and one thing as we lay this out, is what I call our over-under split. In other words, how many of those 15% that are giving half are over 50 as opposed to under 50. If you've got a preponderance of more people above 50 than you do below 50, you've got a crisis waiting to happen. Because remember, 10,000 baby boomers turn 65 every day, and that means they're moving into retirement. And even if they kept giving the traditional 10% tithe to you, they're giving on a proportionate less income base than they were a year or two ago, or 2 years ago, or 3 years ago. And this is why we need to pay attention to the over-under split. One of the things that I do for you as a client, 50% line is important, over-under split is important as well. So what is our key? Our key is retention. And again, that goes back to the Black Bob report. And so what we want to do is we want to take the conversation to the group that is most likely to respond. Now, this is what I'm saying to all my clients when it comes to capital needs that they have. I believe in the tithe and the offering. All right, so the tithe, we want to get all of our people to give him 10%. If you don't believe in tithing, we can argue that later. Grace giving, I think you lose. I think you got to give more money if you want to say grace giving as opposed to tithing. But nonetheless, I'm not going to argue with that. But there is the tithe, which is the giving that I give to my normal regular operating budget, and then there is the offering. And offerings are what touches my heart, springs me into action, what motivates me, that kind of thing. And so we have to work towards that. And so any capital need, whether it's planning a mission, another site, or whatever it is that you've got, has to be funded over and above what you're doing for your regular operating. And so the conversation in that area has to go to the group that has the ability to help you both financially and spiritually. Guess what? They're your leaders. So that leadership track is going to be very important. Where I'm going as a coach is to have all of my churches, and I don't care if you're a small church or a large church, because every church has a group of people whose gifts make a difference. And so my legacy team concept is a group of people who either have the gift of generosity, or they are looking for creative ways to use the blessings God has given them to be a blessing to other people. Now, here's why I think this definition is so important. Because if you take somebody like my mom and dad, who are 91 years old, and some of the most generous people I know, and some of the wealthiest people I know, though they always laugh when I say that, because they probably don't have two nickels to rub together in their mind, and they're fearful they're going to outlive their money, all that. But my dad was an aircraft mechanic for TWA, and my mom was a homemaker for much of my life. So on the world standard, they would not have a lot of money, but my parents just loved giving money away. Why would you not have them on the legacy team? Even though they're not going to give you 5-6 figure gift, their attitude, their heart, their passion is going to infuse and inspire other people. So I don't care what size church you are. Just understand when we talk about the legacy team, what I'm trying to do is take the message of what we're doing to the right crowd so that then they have the best opportunity to respond to help you be fully funded. Your leaders are in that position now. Let's utilize where they are now to help get you to where you need to be. And then here's the next thing, and it is what I call the discipleship track. And if I can get to it, here we go. The discipleship track. And these are your future givers. So the leadership track, you should have said present givers. The discipleship track is accurate here. It's your future givers. What we've got to do is understand this. We didn't get into the mess that we're in terms of the decline in giving overnight. And the other thing is that we have to understand is we're not going to get out of this overnight. There's no quick fix. You can't buy a manual for me, plug it in, and boom, everything's automatically going to get easy. Now, I've got the manuals that'll help you make it easier for a time, but there has to be a long-term strategy. I've got a lot of short-term things that can help you, but we've got to begin thinking long-term. If we don't think long-term, this generational shift in giving is going to come and really make things difficult for us in terms of doing future ministry. So one of the areas, 2 tracks, leadership track, then a discipleship track, because here's what I've discovered. Discipleship-driven churches always have a higher average per giver than those that don't stress discipleship. And generosity is a part of discipleship. We've got to change that conversation. We've got to change that thinking, and you've got to begin now. And it has to be something you teach from womb to the tomb, and that's where we're at. The practical implementation, I think what you're teaching is the stewardship of life across everything that we do, from small group, the platform, to our interactions with people as we lead them. I think this is important. I think the other thing is we have got to understand that debt is such a drag, not just on your members personally, but also on your church. So we've got to get your members out of church, debt so that they have the ability to give. And by the way, we need to get you out of debt so you are not encumbered by the debt that you're involved with, because it's just an albatross that hangs around your debt. I believe in using debt. Often it's the only way churches can get into facilities quickly. And honestly, not wanting to do it, debt-free has a lot of problems to that, and we can talk about that later. So get your members out of debt. I think you got to preach a series on stewardship. I would refer you back to today's newsletter because I talk about that. I think we've got to rethink small groups. I think our whole small group strategy is a big fat fail. Most of the small groups that I've been involved with, and I've been off and on involved in a lot, if at anything, they might study a book. It's basically put a box of Kleenexes in the middle of the table and let's all grab a Kleenex and boo-hoo. Fellowship's important. I don't even think most small groups do that. They eat. What prayer requests do you have? Somebody prays and they go out the door and, hey, we check that off. And we're not discipling men and women, boys and girls, youth to know how to face the onslaught that is out there. We need to rethink small groups. And part of that is that generosity needs to be taught. Energize your leaders, and that's why we want to implement a legacy team plan for you, and I can show you how to implement that and do that in your church, and I think you'll have great success. And the bottom line is get a plan and work your plan. For those of you who are not members, who are not following me, that's always my question to you. Okay, great, you don't want to follow me, well, what's your plan? I've got a church deciding probably in the next few days whether or not to partner with me. I can tell you that the fees, the issue, the pastors on board, key lay people are on board. But I finally just said to the pastor, I said, ask him if I work for free, if you would engage me. And that's my question for those of you who are watching. If I was free, would you engage me? Well, of course you would engage me. Of course you would get that newsletter. It's free. Of course you would get anything that was free, but you wouldn't do anything with it. You'd just shelf it. I can help you be fully funded, both for the present and for the future, if you work with me. So just a word here for you. What's your plan to be able to know that your church is going to be fully funded? Hey, speaking of plans, one of the key manuals that I put together is what I call the Successful Easter Giving Plan. And I will have all of my sites up and running very, very soon. They're working on that. Hope by the time I get done with this webinar, they're close. We'll have that platform up where you can buy things right now. You're just going to have to email me, and I'll give you my email address in just a second. But that's the information that you need. We need to start thinking about your Easter offering. You're thinking about your sermon. You're thinking about what can we do at Track Gas. My thing is, how are you going to use the offering in Easter? I'm going to show you in this manual how you can effectively utilize the offering in a powerful, meaningful way, not drive people off, attract people, and increase not just giving, but givers. So if you need an Easter plan, contact me. And then one of my partners that I always give a little bit of an advertisement time here is onlinegiving.org. I just think these guys are the best in a lot of ways. I love their heart. I love their passion. I love that they believe in the local church. I love their creativity. Their platform is, I think, the best out there. And I've been involved in online giving in one way, shape, form, or another for about a decade. It's one of the early adopters of that. And this is absolutely the best group and organization. You need to check them out today, as well as if you go to onlinegiving.org, you will find that I am their writer in residence. I write a blog post for them every week. And so some good insights there that could be of help to you. By the way, if you want to get the Successful Easter Giving Plan, email me at mark@acts17 generosity.com. acts17generosity.com. mark@acts17generosity.com, and I'll email you a copy of that if you're a member. If you're not a member, you got to pay. I'll talk to you about how you won't have to pay and that kind of thing. So, hey, we're getting ready to move into our question and answer time. And again, just encourage those of you who are listening to start typing in your questions and sending those to me. If you're listening to this on tape delay, there's my email address, mark@acts17generosity.com. Drop me a line, give me what your questions are, and I'll do my best to answer them for you. Most Mondays, I'm here at 11 o'clock Eastern Standard Time doing a little bit of teaching, kind of sharing with you what I think are some very key specific things as church leaders we need to be aware of. And then what I'm getting ready to move into is a group teaching time where all of us in the group can sort of share the questions that we have with one another. So thanks for being with me today. Look forward to sharing with you next Monday another exciting topic. And for all things generosity related, please reach out to me. I'd love to help you in any way I can. We're looking forward to continuing on our session after we stop the recording and Monday mornings with Mark. Thanks for listening in. God bless.